I like to comb Facebook as it relates to a variety of different things, but one day I'm looking at it and I see just a couple of guys, which is, of course, us. Yes. But I look closer and I see Point Nemo. And I look and I say, Point Nemo, what in God's name is this?
Do you know?
Are
you referring to my post?
I read your post about Point Nemo. I'm still not sure I understand it. Enlighten me, please.
Well, do you know anything about Point Nemo?
Not much, except that I think after seeing it, I went online in some obscure place in the world.
Very obscure.
Oh, tell me about it.
It's like the furthest place from civilization you could possibly find. And apparently it's
is it an island?
It's 30. No, it's just an area.
An area? What does that mean, an area?
30 times the size of France. It's in the middle of the Pacific Ocean.
So it is an island.
It's not necessarily an island. It might be a point.
Is it a peninsula?
It's not a peninsula.
Is it an isthmus?
It's not an isthmus. But
Don Isthmus.
So I remember him.
Hello, friends. Happy New Year from Pat Crimmins and Ray Rogina. Just a couple of guys talking everything with our year-end review today in our St. Charles studio. Joining us is producer Paul Stukel, and we are going to review our 2022 podcast series by talking about some of our favorite podcast moments while also discussing local, state, and national issues. All of this after a word from one of our fine sponsors. Stay tuned. Hello, friends. This is Ray Rogina. You face technology challenges every day that threaten to steal business, compromise data, and bring your business down. Without a good partner to help protect from phishing, ransomware, viruses, data breaches, employee turnover, and cybersecurity threats, your business is at risk of losing everything. TechWorks has been the trusted IT partner to Fox Valley businesses for over 20 years, keeping systems secure and providing extraordinary customer service, helping your business grow. Call TechWorks today at 630-482-2227 or visit www.techworks.com. That's TechWorks with a Q. TEQ works, and see how TechWorks IT service can transform and secure your business.
And we're back. I'm very excited to be here with Ray and Paul, the producer. We're going to talk a little bit about the podcast, year in review. Ray, obviously, we started this, I think, in July, and we've had a pretty good...
That's a misnomer.
When did we start?
April.
Okay.
Remember opening day?
It seems like July.
No.
What are your favorite memories or guests, or what did you like most about it?
As long as you brought up the opening volley in April, and if you remember correctly, Jim Belushi was our first podcast guest. I think back to that interview, and two things jumped to mind. One, his tip of the hat to his brother John on really getting him started. We didn't spend much time talking about John because I thought it would be inappropriate, but we got enough information out of him to segue into what I thought was the most compelling part of the interview, and that was his marijuana farm in Oregon. And I'll tell you, I still think about to this day his compelling discussion about the uses of medicinal marijuana for a variety of reasons.
You know, on the way here, I heard a commercial about the veterans trying to get legislation passed to legalize medicinal marijuana federally because there have been studies and data that would indicate that it helps veterans. I think he's a little ahead of the curve on that, and I think that's a good thing. I don't know if the federal government will legalize it, but
and you recall correctly, he also made the comment though that he really didn't want the federal government involved. He wanted to keep it in the states because if the feds get in, there's an additional layer of taxes.
I think the consumers would agree with that because they might also affect the quality of the weed.
So anyway, I also then we went up and down the valley here, and we talked to just about every mayor, village president. And I guess the compelling thing from that set of interviews is just the fact that I think each city has an individual who is the guardian and is really focused on doing well for their city and trying to do the best for the city. From Elgin to Aurora and points west, including Elburn, where the sun never sets.
That's right.
They all had something to say, and they all were quite interesting. I was proud. I obviously know most all of them, and I do know them, and they are wonderful individuals. And the Fox Valley should be happy that they have good leadership in that respect.
We survived COVID. I think the individual mayors talked about their struggles with COVID and how that affected their ability to run the cities. But I think they all did a pretty good job of coming out of the COVID isolation in good stead. Every city's got their own problems, from crime to budgetary issues, police department issues, all sorts of things. But you're right. People are working through it. And hopefully in 2023, we'll see some more progress in that regard.
Yeah, there was that St. Charles guy we got to remember about, Joe.
Yes, that's true. That's true.
It's a joke, folks. He did a great job. I'm sorry.
Thank you. Talking about, and this is your bailiwick, Paul, because you got Belushi for us, and actually Chaz Palminteri and Wayne Newton. I was going to ask what you thought of those two guys. I mean, we had them on. Newton's been around for like over 65 years in show business. And Palminteri is just a freewheeling guy that I think was a very compelling interview. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, I thought Chaz was amazing. I mean, Belushi was good too. I did take a little bit of offense that he kept eating while he was talking to us.
Yes,
as a producer, I found that to be a little bit insulting, but it was fine. No, but he was a good interview. But Chaz was a whole different level. I mean, it was because, and for those who don't know, Chaz Palminteri is an actor, writer, theater, award-winning, all-around artist who grew up in the Bronx. It was the Bronx, right?
North of Yankee Stadium,
amongst the wise guys, and his most potent work has been about that subject. And so we talked to him about that in great detail, and he was very forthcoming. We were talking about him and his friendships with, his still friends with, the wise guys he grew up with, how to avoid the mafia when you're in show business. I mean, it was fascinating.
Well, if you recall,
I was just fascinated.
The line he said that to me was most compelling to that topic you're talking about, when some of the wise guys approached him and wanted to help him out. He refused to help. And then he said to us later on, he says, if I would have said yes, they own me. I would rather put a bullet in my head than have said yes. And I thought to myself, dear God, he was very sincere about that. And to this day, he's become a notable actor. I saw him at the Arcada in his one-man performance of A Bronx Tale, and it was remarkable. So, then I would say I would like to capsulize two podcasts that we had that got in Law and Order. And one was, and Pat, I know that this was a very compelling interview for you because of your experience in the prosecution office at Kane County State's Attorney. Bob Berlin, the DuPage County State's Attorney. And he got us yakking, if you will, about the Safety Act. And boy, we carried that through the rest of the year. Yeah.
Bob Berlin should be at some point in time considered to run for higher office. I think he's a wonderful guy. He runs that office in a wonderful way. They're very tough, but they're fair. And yeah, he did start the ball rolling as it relates to the Safety Act, which has a variety of issues, not the least of which was the bail concern, which has been modified to some extent. As I said to you off camera here earlier, the court is expected to rule on the constitutionality of the Safety Act today, December 28th. So I don't know if that'll happen or not. But if it's found unconstitutional, then they're back to the drawing board. There are a lot of things in the Safety Act that I don't agree with outside of the bail that we talked about, such as felony murder, things of that nature that I, as a former prosecutor, I understand how these tools work, and I understand how beneficial those tools are. And when they take them away for no apparent reason, then that weakens the ability to fight crime, which is a problem, obviously.
Well, let's assume for the sake of conversation that your point is correct and that it is declared unconstitutional, whether it is or not, I don't know. I would like, and I've argued this incessantly with a variety of people, most notably my daughter-in-law, who works for the Attorney General, over the Christmas holidays. And I said, whatever you think of the act one way or the other, it was developed in a sloppy fashion in the middle of the night without a lot of people that should have been at the table being at the table, including the police. And so to me, it would be a fresh start to have meaningful conversation with a lot of different individuals involved to craft something that is worthwhile. And she agreed with me on that. And she said, well, yeah, I can't argue that it was, put together in a very sloppy fashion. Yeah. So we've said that all along. And
I've said this before too. There are some good things in the Safety Act. Police reform, et cetera. There's some good things there that need to be maintained, but there's some other things that, as it relates to the fight against crime, we certainly have to reconsider. We're barely holding our head up above the water, this fight, and when you start taking away tools, that's certainly not helping.
Then we had Kristen 𝐂𝐮 come here to the studio, talked about her book, and pretty much talked about her career from start to finish as finally the Aurora police chief, although she worked her way up through the ranks from starting point of being a cadet. And I thought that was one of the more compelling interviews we had. Maybe it was because my father was a police officer and I enjoyed just all the different conversations she had and the nuances as related to her father, which ended up in a very tragic fashion. But I thought that was just quite an interesting interview. Happy to see that she's continuing her journey, if you will, into discussion and leadership in law enforcement through seminars. And she was on the 𝐉𝐼 Commission, or still is on the 𝐉𝐼 Commission. And so I thought that was quite a good interview.
It's a story about surviving, and she clearly details how she survived her father's alcoholism and everything else. But during all of that, she developed a love for the police and law enforcement. And so as an homage to her father, I think she became a cop and she did a wonderful job and rose through the ranks, like you said. So you don't just become chief by accident or by politics. You have to work and you have to earn it. And she did.
One of my friends, we had a chance to interview, and I say he's a friend of recent vintage, but nevertheless a good friend now, and that's Bill Rex, Mr. Marathon himself out of Geneva. Bill had, I ran into him not too long ago, and he had an accident. He'd fall and hurt his hand, and his leg was hurting him, and he was really concerned about his ability to run any more marathons. And then I saw him in the gym a few weeks ago, and we've run together since, and he's ready to go again, and he's gonna have a marathon run in March, and he's still, I think, looking forward to the opportunity to get 600 before he calls it a day. It's a remarkable accomplishment for a man who now is in his 80s and still, for me, a role model in terms of trying to stay healthy and do something that he's really passionate about. And so my hat's off and Happy New Year to Bill Rex, and may he run many more marathons. Hello, friends. This is Ray Rogina. I'd like to say a few words about my friends at the Karas Group of Restaurants, one of our sponsors. I've been a frequent guest at all of their fine restaurants for years, one of which is Rookies, which has locations throughout the Fox Valley and beyond. My favorite dish at Rookies is the gyros plate with the Saganaki appetizer. Oopa! My wife, she loves the Hall of Fame chicken sandwich. But I can honestly say that I've never had a bad meal there, regardless of whatever I've had to eat. The wings are out of this world, the salads are delicious, great burgers, tacos, all American specialties, and don't forget their pizza. And of course, you can wash this all down with one of their famous Mai Tais. Try them out. St. Charles, Geneva, Elgin, Hoffman Estates, Huntley, and Roselle. RookiesPub.com. I'll see you there. We are back and talking about some of our favorite podcasts and episodes and activity throughout the year. And, back in the beginning of the baseball season, we had Wayne Randazzo on. And he's a St. Charles High School guy, class of 2002. I guess officially he's St. Charles East because of the year he graduated. And now he ascended to the ranks of being one of the play-by-play announcers of the New York Mets. But you learned just recently, and then I checked it out myself today, and it seems like it's on the path to conclusion.
Breaking news.
Breaking news. He has left the New York Mets.
Yes, and projected to be the play-by-play for the California Angels.
And the lead man, no less, because, you always have a lead guy, and then you have either a secondary one who calls a few innings or a color man. But he's the lead guy. He was never the lead guy in New York. Howie Rose was. And so I just ask myself, I guess being the lead guy is more important than broadcasting for a team that, for all intents and purposes on paper, looks like a fireball for this year, the Mets, versus the Angels that have been kind of stuck in mediocrity for the last decade. It's
like an athlete, though. You're going to get paid $300 million, but you're going to play for the Oakland A's, right? you take the money.
Do the A's have any
no.
seven-figure contracts?
But my point is you play for a bad team, but you make the money, and I think maybe Wayne's making some money here.
But while we're talking about baseball, before we get to something else, we did have Curtis Haug from the Cougars on right at the beginning of the baseball season.
That's right.
Well, what do I read here just recently in the local papers that the Kane County Forest Preserve has said to the Cougars in no uncertain terms, hey, you can play there at 𝐿STROM Stadium in 2023, but if you don't pay up the rent that's back due and current, you're out of here after 2023. All I can say is I hope things get settled one way or the other, because it would be a rotten shame to see that form of entertainment leave our environment here.
Now, I'm a fairly conservative guy when it comes to revenues and tax expenditures. So I don't know what kind of backup they're talking about. And I don't know how that affects county government, but I would hate to see the team leave. It's a treasure. We absolutely should keep it if we can. The county should help them. We should get an affiliation. But it seems as though there's a lot of effort to get rid of the team and to take that property for perhaps other use. So I don't know where that comes from.
Paul, at the end of the year, we got very close to actually doing a live broadcast over at the 𝐿STROM Stadium. That would be a kind of a fond wish for 2023.
Absolutely.
That we'd have that opportunity to do such. I think it would just be a lot of fun, engage some of the fans, some of the players, and have a chance to do it in the skybox, which we were offered last year.
Right.
Yeah. Well, we got hit by COVID. One of our staff persons got hit by COVID, and she was irreplaceable. So, and then we were going to do one of the playoff games, if you remember, but they've got the weird playoff system where if you've got a better record than the other guy, you have to start off on the road. It was one of those weird, it's the strangest thing I've ever seen. So, but yeah, next year ought to be fun. I'm looking forward to it.
It's nice to know that somebody on the podcast is irreplaceable, Ray. When I miss, you guys just go ahead without me.
Right? There is some truth to that. Just a joke.
Oh boy, no, we're kidding. I'm kidding.
The last thing I want to say about the podcast here is the fact that on occasion you and I just acted silly and did some things just for fun. I think of bleachers at Wrigley Field and just sitting in your office waxing about this or that. But I would say,
is the caller there?
Is the caller there, and a variety of other things. But if I had to point to one incident that I'm still laughing about every time I think about it, it's our, you got it started by talking about Point Nemo. Right. And the fact that you talked to somebody allegedly at the
gas station,
Costco or wherever it was, gas station at some point, Nemo. Well, lo and behold, then we move forward, and our producer here, Paul, I kept grilling you there. You go, where is Point Nemo? And you talk, what's out there somewhere? And
it's an area. It's not
an area. It's not an isthmus, not a peninsula. It's not an island. It's out there.
Lots of geography.
Paul sent both of us, if you recall, at the end of the year, some sort of actual latitudinal. I can't pronounce that. I would say it, the latitude and longitude of Point Nemo. The coordinates, if you will, out there somewhere in the middle of nowhere.
Right.
Where did you find that?
In the middle of the Pacific. I just ran across it in Twitter. Some dude had written something about Nemo, Point Nemo, and I was like, "You got to be kidding me! We're not the only ones." And I saw it, and I figured you guys would be interested in it because it gave sort of this top-down picture from a satellite of this vast area of the ocean, which is known as Point Nemo. And it's the definition is that it is the place on Earth that is furthest away from any land. I think that's right.
As you do, yes.
As I clearly described.
And in fact, it's the closest thing to it is the space station.
That's correct. So the funniest thing about that story, I thought, was the fact that the guy said he's really not from Point Nemo. He's about 40 miles west. So and I've been hearing that ever since I moved out here, that people say they're from Chicago, but they're really not. See what I'm saying?
I think, with all due respect, I think Wayne Randazzo one time on an interview that I heard on the Score said he was from Chicago. Well, we know he's from St. Charles.
That's right.
Wayne, with all due respect, that what irritated me that we didn't get proper knowledge.
That's right. So I think, to be honest, my opinion is that was some of the most fun that we had on the podcast was these outtakes or these other things. We went off on the pheasant run. We had personal stories about various issues. So that was fun for me, and I enjoyed that.
Well, we'll try to sneak those back in at some point during the 2023 year. Looking ahead now to 2023, and I thought we could have an engaging conversation about news stories, local, state, and national. And as we talk about them, perhaps some predictions can be made about where we see a particular topic going as we move into 2023, knowing that my baseball predictions last year were pretty bad and some other things. But I would like to start, first of all, by saying, going back to the mayors, by saying we have two contested mayoral races here in the Fox Valley that are notable. We interviewed Mayor Captain in Elgin, and he is being challenged by a member of the city council in Elgin, Corey Dixon. I'm not going to make a prediction on that race, but I'm going to say that it would be good if before it went down, we got a chance to bring both of them on to talk about the issues of that particular race.
Sure. As we know, the Elgin Police Department is having some issues with the chief. There was a vote of no confidence with her. There's some racial undertones in Elgin that go back to a shooting that occurred by an Elgin police officer. So it wouldn't surprise me that this Dixon does quite well in this. Is this a primary?
No, this is mano a mano for all the marbles.
Okay. Wouldn't surprise me if he does well. Wouldn't surprise me if he won. Elgin is a city that's looking for different. No doubt about it.
I'll not comment on that one way or the other. I appreciate.
It's just my opinion.
I appreciate that opinion. I'll just, given the fact that I work with one of them, and I actually met the other candidate, Mr. Dixon. They're both fine men, in my opinion, and it'll be interesting to see how the issues are debated. And so I'm looking forward to the conversation, and I'm hoping we're going to get him on here as well.
Oh, that would be
in
fun.
Naperville. Mayor Chirico is stepping down. I think there's a term limit over there, and so you've got three individuals: Benny White, Scott Worley, and Tiffany Stevens, running for that office.
Nonpartisan, right?
None of them are on the Naperville City Council currently, although White's had a school board position in 2004. Worley's been on the Liquor Commission. Stevens works for a non-for-profit. Be good to have those three have a conversation for our friends in Naperville and hear what the issues are as we move forward to 2023 in the city. Obviously, one of the biggest in the state, and certainly has quite a bit of influence here in the western suburbs in particular.
Certainly.
I always stay local for a second. I don't mind opining upon an area that is near and dear to my heart because I'm a resident of St. Charles, and that's the old police station site in St. Charles. As many of you have watched and heard, there's been a relatively ongoing debate about what should go there. And there have been proposals made by a couple of different builders. And there's been an argument made as to whether the proposals bring too much in the form of content on the site itself, too much in the way of possible parking issues, et cetera, et cetera. I just have the following comment to make about the project in general without getting into the nuances of the specificity of what project is better or not better. And that's this. I watched a piece of property at Randall and 38 sit fallow for 15 years. And in that time, I thought about the amount of lost income to the city of St. Charles because it sat fallow and a deal could not be struck to develop that property. I would say the same thing is true here on the river at the old police station site. And my fond wish to everybody involved is simply to get everybody in a room. That would include the mayor, the city administrator, the legal counsel, the two builders who have put proposals on the table, the neighborhood association that's arguing and raising some concerns, any and all business downtown that wants to say their piece. Bring them all together and come up with some kind of hybrid that everybody can be happy with. That might take some time. But they just put it on the back burner now, like it's being proposed by a few of the council members, to me, does not make sense. And that's just my honest opinion. There's certainly a variety of other opinions out there, but I would like to see progress on the site sooner than later without jumping to any conclusions until there's a consensus by all parties concerned.
Well, you hope there is a consensus. In St. Charles is interesting because you have old St. Charles and you have relative new St. Charles.
Very well defined.
And,
yes, indeed. I agree with that.
Old St. Charles is resisting this idea of this growth, from what I hear, because of traffic and et cetera, et cetera. So they're basically saying we don't want this construction because it's going to affect the town in a qualitative way. Whereas I think other people say, yeah, bring it on. It's good for everybody. So the bottom line is you're going to have to do it right. I agree with what you're saying. You have to incorporate everybody's opinion, but let's get it done. All right, let's move on this piece of property. How long has it been?
Well, we opened the station in 2000 at the end of November of 2017. You do the math on that.
Yeah.
And so it sat there for a while.
This is separate and apart from any discussion about the municipal building, right?
Oh, God, yes. I mean, I think that was bantered about during the election. Right. There were some, charges that were going to tear it down. And so I thought that was all folly.
Right.
And I said so. But the fact of the matter is the municipal center is a national landmark. And to do anything to it, it would require a lot of conversation and probably litigation. That's not going anywhere. It is our municipal center. Not that it can't be used better.
Right.
In my humble opinion, we don't use it well enough.
Right.
And that more people should see the beauty of it inside. And so I would also say that. I'll never forget one time our communication director came to me. I was the mayor and said to me, I had to tell this couple, they want to get married in the rotunda. It's a beautiful piece in the municipal center with stained glass, and they just want to get married there in a very short ceremony. We told them they couldn't because it's against the city ordinance. Right. That's baloney.
Right.
We should be encouraging things like that. More than saying no, you can't come in. I enjoyed when the kids would come in on tours and we would talk and bring them in there, and I would tell them it's haunted and everything else.
Oh yeah,
a lot of fun.
Maybe $2,500 a wedding.
Again, a revenue source.
Put that in the building fund.
There you go. There you go. There you go.
At McNally Heating and Cooling, we understand that customer satisfaction starts with arriving at your home on time. Your service technician will apply the same attention to detail and quality workmanship to every job, large or small. We offer upfront, honest pricing, and we'll make sure the job gets done right from start to finish. From furnace and air conditioning service, minor repairs, or total equipment replacement, we do it all. Give us a call or find us online and let the luck of the Irish work for you.
We're back after a wonderful word from our sponsor, and I wanted to talk a little bit more about local issues here. Obviously, the county board makeup has changed a little bit. A few more Democrats are on the board.
In fact, aren't they the majority now as far as the 24-member board? The Democrats have an edge.
I think that's right. And it's amazing. This county used to be so Republican and so conservative, and now it's leaning the other way, at least in terms of some of the office holders, state's attorney, sheriff, that kind of thing. Now the county board. So be interesting to see what they do with the power. They got a budget passed. I haven't really gone through the particulars yet, but everybody seemed to get what they wanted, and we'll have to see whether that was appropriate spending or not. But
the chairman asked me to, when they were sworn in at the annex over there on Randall Road, asked me to give an invocation prior to the being sworn in, and I was happy to do it. It wasn't it didn't have religious overtones. In fact, it was more of a charge, and the charge that I came up with to say to the 24 members of the board was, I believe most of our citizenry wants to see you work across the aisle, work to in a collegial fashion to come to consensus on most issues without fights, and certainly nothing degrading, insulting, or humiliating like we see at some levels of government. And I'm hoping that we can keep that, at least that in focus as we move forward in 2023, and our 24 members of the board look to some meaningful legislation and allocation of resources.
Yeah, I don't think asking for civility is asking too much.
God, no.
As a lawyer, we have to deal with these issues all the time, inside and outside of the courtroom. So, but let's talk about 2024 and 2023. Any board members up for reelection?
In 24, half the board will be up for reelection.
Including the chairman, right?
Including the chairman. That's exactly right. And I don't for a minute doubt that it'll be a contested race. It always has been and will continue to be. We'll see what happens there. But
That tax hike ever come out? Is that official?
I haven't seen any tax hike yet, but now that everybody's in place for a while.
St. Charles rose taxes a little bit, didn't they? Or a little beyond their...
The levy was increased by close to 5%, I think it was.
So it's coming.
School board as well in St. Charles. I can't speak to... My guess is because of the inflation and because of the law that allows them to go up to 5%. Right. A lot of them are taking that as part of their levies. And that includes, from Elgin to Aurora and Naperville and Elburn, where the sun never sets. Elburn, by the way, we got a new police station. Speaking of things, we talked about this before.
We don't have a new police station
on the ballot.
Oh, on the ballot.
And schools on the ballot.
Right.
And I think we talked about that at the Kindle market. You said you were skeptical about whether it would pass or not.
I am skeptical always out there because there's not a lot of wealth in that community, let's be honest. But we have to raise the school funding, no doubt about it, to compete. We're losing teachers to St. Charles and Geneva and Batavia. We can't compete with them. We need resources. We don't have all the AP classes that everybody else offers. We do have a lot of special needs in the district. It's a very big district. So I'm in favor of that. And obviously the police station, as I told you before, it's like a fishing hut where you
That's
cut up.
Not funny. I shouldn't be laughing.
No.
To enforce the laws of the city and the state, you need a competent, resourceful place to do such.
Right.
And
you were a teacher for years. You were a business department chair. You're working in a little office. It's difficult. It's stressful. And to have that important work to be so minimized like that.
Before we get back to the county for a second, and before we get away from that,
Right.
It seems like there was some movement toward closure of an issue we talked about early in the summer, and that was justice for Ludwig.
Ludwig, yes.
And our crack producer, also the editor,
In his other capacity.
Our on-crack producer, perhaps.
Yes.
But you did provide a exclusive story about the latest update on Ludwig, and I'd like to
give us a little timeline.
All right,
and then to the latest. Yeah.
So the timeline was, for those who don't know, and it's if you're out there, I don't know where you've been. Ludwig is a dog who got shot by a man in Wayne.
Fatally
Shot.
Okay.
Okay, I thought that was implied.
You buried the lead.
Perhaps not. Anyway, so the Ludwig, the owners, Ludwig's owner is a guy named Joe Pettit, I think is how you pronounce it. And he was devastated by the fact that his dog was fatally shot by a guy named Hal Phipps in Wayne. Hal happens to be the husband of the president of Wayne, or whatever they call their
village president. Yes.
Village president, yeah. So that added a little political flair into it. So Joe goes to the authorities and demands that Hal be arrested. This is now becomes a regional cause celeb. Justice for Ludwig becomes a thing. There are demonstrations and all kinds of stuff. This is all happening over
yard signs.
Yard signs everywhere. So anyway, Ludwig, who by the way is not really that cute of a dog. Anyway, Ludwig.
So you're saying that if you're good looking, you deserve to live?
Yeah. No. In dog world, yeah. I'm sorry, people. It's a joke. I love dogs. Anywho, so state's attorney and the King County sheriff both take a look at it. They come away with the belief that this was an act of self-defense, or at the very least, it couldn't be proven that it wasn't self-defense, and therefore should not be charged. Lots of hullabaloo, lots of protesting. Joe gets a lawyer and makes a lot of noise. Weirdly, a little bit later on, as this public pressure continues to mount, the King County State's Attorney, Miss Mosser, changes her mind and says, well, maybe we should have a grand jury look at the evidence. I know, Pat, as a lawyer, as a prosecutor yourself, that was rather an astonishing turn of events. So anyway, that happened about 9 months ago, at least. It was supposed to be done in May. It just went dead silent. And the scoop that everybody is talking about from Fox Valley Magazine, by golly.
Good Morning America.
Good Morning America. That's right. Breaking. No, we got our hands on an email that King County State's prosecutor sent to Joe's lawyer, and basically telling him, whoop, I've changed my mind again. And we're not going to put this in front of a grand jury, and that's the end. Tough. So there you go. And that seems to be the end of the story, because we have not gotten a statement from Joe or Joe's lawyer as of yet.
Now, I know you have several opinions on this. Before you do, I would only add on a political note that Ms. Phipps, the Wayne Village Board president, is being challenged in an election this spring. So when we talk about contested races, I should mention that the Wayne race is contested, and I forget the man's name, but he is challenging her for village president. And I would not for a minute not think that the Ludwig situation certainly is part of the package.
Oh, these are the issues that you have to run from, because they're the ones that get the electorate out on voting day.
Get the electorate electric.
Yes, exactly. Now, that's a nonpartisan election, or is she a Democrat?
Nonpartisan.
Yeah. Is she a Democrat, though, generally?
Well, I don't know.
We don't know. Yeah, I mean, I was critical of her going back to the grand jury after a decision that there wasn't sufficient evidence, saying that that's not what we do. We don't put our finger in the air, seeing which way the wind blows. But we did have the caveat of, well, if there's new evidence, if the lawyer brought some new evidence, because there was this talk that the lawyer had presented something to her. And then now, first off, to have this delay of 9 months, what's going on during that time? Are we all just was it ever going to happen? Was it just some kind of a let's placate the mob here? And then to decide, what was it, Christmas Eve? When did it happen? when did she decide? Then to decide that she's not going to present anything at all. So I guess we didn't have any new evidence. I don't know that. But either way, she just decided to go with her initial plan, and we have no idea. But I will say this, that's not how a professional ordinarily runs a state's attorney's office. We don't go back and forth and that kind of thing. If we do, we don't make press conferences of decisions, right? We kind of do it in the back room a little bit, and we talk it through with other professionals, and we make a decision. We don't go public with our thought process.
Well, I can only guarantee this, that our producer and Fox Today Magazine will stay on top of this because we made it an issue back in early part of the year, and we'll see at the conclusion, whatever that conclusion was.
And there are people, by the way, and I'm not in any way suggesting anything by this, but there are people that gave money to the cause.
Exactly.
So where is that? That kind of thing.
A lot of questions here. Moving to the state level, and just a couple of comments I want to make about the state of Illinois. And, these are my own opinions again, and we're making some predictions and we're throwing some opinions out, and it's based upon what's happened. But I opened the Wall Street Journal this morning, and I find that we are now third in the country in terms of people leaving the state after California and New York. So we're in the top three. And of course, Florida, Texas, and North Carolina, I believe, are the top three for influx of residents.
Florida, Texas.
Top 10. Yeah. There's a top 10 on leaving. New Jersey's fourth, I think it is. And there's a top 10 on coming in. Although I saw Oklahoma was 10th, and I'm saying, why would anybody want to go to Oklahoma?
Can't put two things in Oklahoma.
Well, Stallone's there, Tulsa King, but whatever.
Excuse me.
I wanted to say that for starters, and then I'd only like to say that, after watching the Illinois political scene for a while and actually living through it as a mayor, and so I would make these comments. I really believe we are not going to progress as a state until we get some balance in Springfield in terms of political parties, number one. And that, and again, as somebody who tends to be left of center, except on certain issues, particularly law and order, I would say that the supermajority that Democrats have in Springfield does us no good.
Right.
I'm just going to make that comment bluntly and say that a proper balance down there with a leader and an ability for moderates, like you've talked many times about working across the aisle, will do the state well and turn it around a bit. And in fact, I'll even go this far, that I think Pritzker was much more vulnerable had the Republicans put up a decent candidate for governor than the one they put up. We had a chance to talk to him and to his primary opponent, Richard Irvin, and found out the only thing we agreed with him on was, you and I, the only thing we agreed upon was his stance on the Safety Act. He wanted to repeal the darn thing.
And even that, he wanted to repeal it, and he really didn't have the power to do that. So.
but anyway, so that's just my pitch on the state of Illinois as it currently is structured. The faster we get some balance down in Springfield, the better.
Well, I would say this, that people leaving the state of Illinois could be for a variety of reasons. We presume that it's because people are tired of Illinois, tired of taxes, tired of the mismanagement, tired of the corruption. But it could well be that there are jobs in Texas, that there are jobs in Louisiana and North Carolina.
Oh, Louisiana, by the way, they're in the top 10 of bailouts.
Okay. I've been to Louisiana. Yes,
I spent all year there one day.
Right. But I welcome it, because if you want to leave, go ahead and leave, because I love this state. There are parts of it that aren't worthy of love. There's no doubt about it. I just read some analysis of the election as to how the candidate Bailey did against Rauner as Rauner ran, and Rauner killed him in certain areas, except for some southern counties. Rauner, you would call maybe a moderate or slightly right moderate, destroyed him. So the Republican Party in Illinois has to realize that Jim Edgar and candidates like Jim Edgar are that's the way. And if we don't have candidates like that, if we don't have moderate candidates, then we're never going to have power, right? Now, supermajorities are bad. I don't care where you're at. They're just bad for the voters and bad for the constituents. But what are we going to do about that? Is the Republican Party going to reshape itself? Where are these candidates?
Well, I think at least among my friends, and I think we probably, the three of us consider and say among all of our friends that there is no objection among any of us to seeing Democrats and Republicans, particularly moderates, and in some cases, they're a little more bent on conservatism or a little more bent on liberalism, in power, working across the aisle, come up with meaningful legislation that benefits the entire country to make us what I still believe to be the greatest country in the world, but yet with numerous flaws now that need to be corrected. So that's kind of my pick. As we move into a conversation about the national level after our break, those are my thoughts. So, Illinois, a lot of work to do.
Cook County has 70% of the votes. 70%. You cannot be a conservative, MAGA, right-wing Republican and hope to get any of those votes. So you're going to need to have somebody that can get into that 70%.
And Jim Edgar certainly got into that 70%, didn't he, back in the day, because they're a solid moderate.
If the Republican Party wishes to continue with kind of Trump-like right-wing type candidates, then they're going to still lose at the back.
Okay, so I'm now going to jump in here. As is my, I've been waiting patiently.
We're at the state level now, right?
All right, I've been waiting patiently for this for about 6 months.
Bailey wasn't a Trump candidate?
Sorry. Bailey was a Trump candidate. Bailey was a disaster. Okay, don't give me. I'm completely with you on that.
All right.
I didn't see a whole mess of other MAGA candidates. MAGA doesn't represent the GOP in Illinois. My problem is that nothing represents the GOP in Illinois. I mean, I watched this cycle with. What's the right word? Despair. Despair is the right word.
That's a fair term.
Because I mean, if there was an opportunity in the state of Illinois for this moribund Republican Party to do something. And I'm not saying they were going to take over everything, right? But they could have made enormous gains.
I agree.
Given the issue set that was in front of them, and particularly ones that we saw particularly in Virginia, that dealt with the schools, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, that is an issue that is absolutely tailor-made for what are called the soccer moms, suburban moms.
Agreed. And
I didn't hear a bloody thing, not from any of the candidates and of Republican candidates. It is as if it didn't exist, and I'm not going to name names, but the Republican candidate in my neck of the woods, who wasn't even opposed, so he didn't have any risk to assume. Whenever he was interviewed about the issues, I felt like it was 1983. The taxes are too high, regulations too heavy, law and order. I mean, brilliant. So you're just going to completely ignore this earthquake that's been going across the country. That is an opportunity for you to finally get back in the game, and they ignored it. So. There is no GOP party. There's no part of it.
I just real quick.
Go ahead. Yeah,
I can't disagree with much of anything you said. Yeah, to be honest with you.
I agree with that too. But I think part of the problem is this primary system, which is basically it feeds the right and the left wings of the party.
God, absolutely.
And a moderate cannot get in. You can run against somebody in a primary as a moderate, you're not going to win. So it caters to those wings, and that's the flaw in the system. And I don't know how maybe a open primary.
On that note, we're going to take a small break. And when we return, we're going to segue this conversation into the national scene and conclude this open forum here at the end of the year on some predictions and topics relative to the national scene, not only politics, but a few other things at the national level as well, and perhaps even international, the war in Ukraine. We'll be right back.
Hey everybody, we're here to welcome a new sponsor. His name is Ted Buckley, and he has a website, tedbuckley.com. He wrote a book called Retired. What do you want to do for the next 30 years? Ted has spent several years helping people plan financially for retirement. But retirement, as we all know, is much more than just money. It's the day-to-day aspects of retirement that we all need to work on. How are you going to make 30 years of retirement the happiest time of your life? You can buy this book at Amazon or at Barnes & Noble. We thank Ted for coming on board as a sponsor of Just a Couple of Guys.
We are back for our final segment here, and we're going to move to the national scene to talk a bit about what happened in 22 and perhaps make some predictions about 23. And I would start the conversation to both you guys by simply saying one word, and that is former President Trump, who dominates a lot of the news, despite the fact that he's kind of a hermit in Mar-a-Lago, but seems to want to say a lot of things there. So I'll start with Trump and talk about what both of you feel to be his fate in 2023.
Well, I certainly believe that we have the right prosecutor, not necessarily to indict, but to necessarily review. This is a professional prosecutor. He's not Robert Mueller. He's certainly more aggressive, and I believe a little more aware of the situation here. So, if Jack Smith says we don't have the horses to charge Trump with certain things, I would have no problem believing that. He's certainly not going to be in bed with any Republican or Democrat in terms of that decision process. Ultimately, it's Merrick Garland's decision, regardless of whether there's a special prosecutor. He will get indicted. I think he will get indicted in Georgia on the state charge. I think he will get indicted on January 6th for something. I don't know about sedition or treason or anything else that they're talking about. Obviously, the January 6th committee has made referrals, which I think we all agree is a meaningless exercise. But as I said before about January 6th, that committee serves a purpose. And that purpose was to educate the country. Let's talk about what's out there. We're not saying it's proof beyond a reasonable doubt, but it's out there. So if there are indictments of a former president, I don't think the public will be shocked by it. I don't think there'll be riots in the streets because it's been laid out. And there's more, of course, that we don't know about. There might be plea agreement deals and testimony deals and leniency agreements.
And as a former prosecutor who knows about that tough burden of proof beyond a reasonable doubt.
Right.
There's a difference between indictment and actually then proving the case in a court of law.
Right. But the federal government does a real good job of only charging people with cases they feel they can win. And a lot of people in the state's attorney's offices feel the same way. But the reasonable doubt standard is a little bit different in a state house than it is in the federal government. In the federal government, you usually get a letter from the U.S. attorney saying, you are a suspect, you are a target, this is the evidence we have against you. If you want to plead, you can do this or that. So they kind of know in advance of what's happening. And so does the target. In this case, it would be Trump. And so obviously, he could reject the offering, and he gets indicted. And I really, obviously, picking a jury is always difficult, but I certainly believe that he can be convicted of certain crimes related to January 6th, certainly as it relates to the archives. It's relatively simple. There's certain material he shouldn't have had. Now, whether people care, as it turns out, what's the material? Whether they care that he had it, That's jury lenity. That's not anything to do with the state's attorneys or the federal government. And then Georgia, of course, seems to be another case where
it seems like it's a slam dunk almost.
Fairly simple.
Everybody in the world has heard the tape.
Right.
Paul, we had a conversation offline several months ago, I think it was, and I asked you point blank about Trump, and I think you were pretty clear as to what you think needs to happen for us to be. And we note to everybody, all three of us believe that he needs to be gone, but you approached it from a different angle. I'd like you to discuss that. To me, as a matter of political hygiene, as it were, it's much better for him to get voted out by his own party. So in other words, defeat him on the political battlefield and he will be gone forever. Okay. If you indict him, if you bring him down, and we'd have to define what bring him down means, via the legal system, he will, it's Obi-Wan Kenobi, right? Strike me down and I'll become more powerful than you can imagine. He will then be a martyr, and his fanatical, although limited, band of followers, his base, will never give that up. If, on the other hand, he is thumped in the primaries by whomever, then his brand just gets destroyed, and he can't come back from that. So, to me, and it's also an affirmative thing. It's basically saying, "I reject you," as opposed to having a third party, being the court, take him away. If I may, the risk is real, though, that to your point about the base, and then to Pat's earlier point about primaries, he wins 35% of the vote in the Republican primaries, which may make him the candidate.
That's how we got it last time.
And if that happens, now we perhaps have an indicted president, not convicted certainly yet by I don't think by even 2024, this summer, running to regain the office.
Right.
To me, just as an American citizen, that to me is scary.
Well, the idea that the government, by indicting him, would make him a martyr, I think he's already been made a martyr many times over. At least he's played that game. I've been impeached. There's been this. There's been the Russia thing.
I guess I was referring to a conviction.
Right. Well,
I don't think an indictment brings him down.
Not necessarily. No, I don't. That's true. And you're right.
We all agree upon that.
It'll be scorched earth. He'll fight it to the very end. There's no doubt about that. But I think if the federal government brings charges and the state of Georgia brings charges, he will lose on something. Whether he goes to prison or not, it's a whole different story.
You're a state's attorney formally. Right. Just look at Georgia just for a second. Just for a second. Could the process move pretty quickly through Georgia, though? Indicting him. Here, you got this evidence. You got this tape. Here's the charge.
Sure.
And then run it through. How long would that take?
State charge. I mean, the defendant has a right to a speedy trial. The state doesn't. So the defendant can waive his right and continue it out as long as the judge will allow it for purposes of discovery or preparing, that kind of thing. So, the state charge would move faster. There's no doubt about that. Also, he could plead. There could be charges against his family that the government might say, we're not going to charge your daughter. All sorts of things could happen where he'll take a conviction, probation, pay a fine, and move on with his life. But I agree with Paul. The best way would be for the Republican Party to cleanse itself, if possible, and to root him out, whatever candidate it is, and to have that candidate take his place.
McCarthy, I think, will end up being speaker. He is as dumb as a brick. Forgive me. He's an extraordinary fundraiser, apparently.
So is Pelosi.
I don't think he has any principles whatsoever. But that's not necessarily doesn't mean he's a bad speaker. He may not be a bad speaker. That the intelligence doesn't preclude you from, or lack thereof, preclude you from being successful in politics. But to one point on, so yes, I think he gets through. One quick point in regard to what Pat just said. I understand what you're saying. The idea of having a massive investigative, term of Republicans looking under every rock is a bad look. I agree.
Right.
I do think it's a little bit extreme. I think there are some things that do need to be investigated. That's the role of the Congress. The role of the Congress is to investigate the executive. So I do think there are some things that need to be investigated, but I agree with you. Doing it sort of an across the board investigation would be nuts.
Like avoid revenge investigations, that kind of thing.
Correct. Yeah. Right. So there you go.
And I guess my last point on speaker prowess, if you will, and this is a conversation you and I had with Paul a while back, and I know you have no love lost for Nancy Pelosi, but you did say that you thought she handled the extremes on the Democrat side well, as opposed to whether or not McCarthy will manage the Boeberts of the world and the Marjorie Taylors, the Greens of the world, and the Matt Getzes of the world.
Yeah. Oh, it's really kind of fascinating when you think about
Jordan.
These two,
Jim Jordan.
These two, it literally is just flipped in a mirror way. Pelosi had like 5 or 6 people to work with of margin, 5 or 6 people margin, and yet she had about 7 or 8 real radicals that she had to deal with. It's the
squad.
Same situation here. You've got maybe in this situation, maybe the radicals, there are a few more, but still now, McCarthy's got 5 or 6 margin. He's got his wing. She was masterful. I mean, there's no other way to describe it. She was absolutely
and the fundraising
masterful.
The fundraising talent plays into that.
Yeah.
No doubt about that.
I thought she was strategically not. Everyone talked about her great strategy. I thought she was really bad on strategy, but God Almighty, was she good tactically? She really was.
Let's for our last item here. I want to throw a quote out by my brother-in-law who lives in Arizona. Let's go back to Arizona for a second. We talked about that and how the Republicans are in trouble over there. And take this for what it's worth. There's been conversation now that Ms. Lake, on losing the governor's race and having it in good stead until Trump came out there and all hell broke loose, now is talked about the run against Kyrsten Sinema for senator. And I will quote my brother-in-law, now a native of, not a native, but a resident of Arizona, point blank said, Sinema will kick her butt. Thoughts on that one? Or do you think Ms. Lake is still a force in Arizona?
I don't think she's a force. Not anymore. I think that's over. I want to talk about cleansing. She self-cleansed her. But I'm surprised that she wasn't, her team was not assessed sanctions other than some expert fees. But yeah, I think she's done. Sinema's going wouldn't bother me.
As a Republican, I would just say I would vote for Sinema over Lake.
As I would.
Even if the Senate was in the balance.
As a Democrat.
Right.
Oh, yeah. I mean.
First of all, let me conclude here by saying I thought this was as a member of this team, I thought this was a great conversation to kind of draw closure to our year together. And I'd like to really just conclude this podcast by saying that it's been quite an enjoyable year of conversation, laughter, insight, and just plain fun since our first podcast with Jim Belushi back in April. Pat and I have appreciated the work of producer Paul Stukel and his staff, particularly Kevin Ketchum and Laura Spencer, for providing the professional touches that make us a step ahead of other podcasts. And we hope to bring you much more in 2023 with new guests and new conversations while continuing to talk everything. We thank our loyal listeners who have obviously given us the opportunity to talk to guests, but ultimately talk to you. And we thank our sponsors who have had faith in our content and presentation. So For our producer, Paul Stukel, who plans on bringing home an Illini victory from Tampa while taking a well-earned vacation. For Pat Crimmins and yours truly, Ray Rogina, looking at 2023 as a continuation of talking everything under our Fox Valley Magazine umbrella. We bid you farewell, wishing you a happy new year, having fun at your celebrations, while continuing to stay safe and be safe. So long, everyone.